We live in a world where labor is praised as the highest virtue. From the time we're children, we're told that if we work hard, we'll succeed, that sweat and sacrifice are noble, and that those who fail simply didn't try hard enough. But is this story true, or is it a kind of myth we've inherited, a modern morality tale that hides a darker truth? Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher so often misunderstood, warned us about the subtle traps built into morality, especially the morality of labor. He saw that the virtue of hard work was not just about economic activity, but about control, about keeping the majority obedient while rewarding a few with comfort and power. In this sense, morality became less about what is good for the soul, and more about what is useful to the system. Today, we're going to break this illusion. We'll explore why the hardest workers often earn the least, not just through economics, but through Nietzsche's piercing critique of morality, power, and human potential. This is not just a history lesson or economic commentary. It's a journey into the philosophy of freedom, and why seeing clearly may be the first step to escaping the cycle. 1. The myth of hard work as a moral good. In modern capitalist societies, labor is not just necessary, it is sanctified. We equate work with virtue. The person who works 2 jobs just to make ends meet is praised as honest and respectable, while the person who inherits wealth or profits from passive income is often seen with suspicion, even jealousy. But what if our entire perception of work is built on a lie? Nietzsche would argue that we've moralized labor not because it makes us better, but because it makes us manageable. When people believe their struggle is virtuous, they are less likely to rebel. The worship of hard work, especially when it doesn't lead to freedom or power, becomes a form of psychological obedience. It transforms suffering into something sacred, even when that suffering is unnecessary or unjust. We have to ask, if hard work was truly moral, why do the most exploited people often work the hardest? Janitors, factory workers, miners, they expend enormous energy, often under brutal conditions, and yet the fruits of their labor benefit others far more than themselves. Nietzsche would say that this glorification of labor is a tool, a myth designed to serve someone else's will to power. 2. Slave morality and the weaponization of obedience. To understand Nietzsche's critique, we must understand his concept of slave morality. According to Nietzsche, the weak, the oppressed, and the powerless, unable to assert themselves through force, created a new kind of morality. This morality elevated traits like humility, patience, submission, and suffering, not because they were inherently good, but because they were strategically useful for survival under domination. Slave morality flips the values of the strong, where the aristocratic class prized strength, pride, and achievement. The slaves turned those very things into sins. In this upside-down world, being poor, passive, and obedient became a badge of righteousness. And here's the catch: this moral code was passed down, institutionalized in religion, reinforced in education, and now embedded in our economic systems. Nietzsche believed this was one of the most profound deceptions ever played on the human spirit. When you glorify your own chains, you stop looking for a key. Modern labor, especially low-wage, high-effort work, fits perfectly into this moral mold. It makes the suffering of the many seem noble, and the power of the few seem shameful, even when the roles are reversed in who benefits. 3. Ressentiment, the psychology of the resentful worker. Nietzsche introduces a powerful idea called ressentiment, a kind of toxic resentment that emerges when people feel powerless but can't express it directly. Instead of confronting the source of their pain, they transform their impotence into moral superiority. They say things like, "At least I work hard and honestly," or "the rich are all corrupt." These statements may have truth, but they also mask a deeper feeling of defeat. Ressentiment is the moral camouflage of the powerless. It allows the worker to feel good about their suffering by turning it into a symbol of purity. But here lies the danger. This attitude doesn't challenge the system. It preserves it. If anything, it encourages people to remain in their suffering, while blaming others who succeed without suffering the same way. Nietzsche warned that ressentiment kills the human spirit. It stifles creativity, ambition, and the desire for greatness. It doesn't seek freedom. It seeks revenge disguised as justice. And when a society is built on ressentiment, it punishes those who rise and glorifies those who endure, even if that endurance leads nowhere. 4. The will to power, a new philosophy of work. So what is the alternative? If glorifying hard labor is a trap, should we all just reject work entirely? Nietzsche's answer is far more radical. He introduces the idea of the will to power, not as brute domination, but as the innate drive within every living being to expand, to create, to overcome. The will to power urges us not to suffer blindly, but to transform effort into expression, mastery, and freedom. It's not about being lazy, it's about being sovereign. The person who lives through the will to power doesn't labor because they're told to. They labor because they are building something of their own, whether that's a work of art, a business, a philosophy, or a way of life. It's creative, not merely productive. In this framework, labor is no longer a sacrifice. It becomes a tool for self-overcoming. The true philosopher, artist, or entrepreneur doesn't see work as moral or immoral. They see it as a path to power, authenticity, and becoming who they are meant to be. And that changes everything. 5. Why the system rewards obedience, not effort. We often assume that wealth follows effort, but that's rarely true. In fact, the economic system we live in tends to reward position, capital, and compliance far more than raw effort. Why? Because the system doesn't need excellence from the majority, it needs predictability and efficiency. Nietzsche would say this is by design. Systems don't evolve to reward freedom, they evolve to maintain power. That's why the hardest workers are often locked into repetitive, mechanical tasks. Their effort produces value, but that value is siphoned upward. Meanwhile, those at the top work less but hold more leverage. They don't exchange time for money. They exchange ideas, networks, or ownership. This inversion of reward is not accidental. It's a reflection of what the system values: obedience over originality, consistency over creativity. The lie of moral labor convinces people that if they just keep trying, they'll eventually succeed. But without power, without leverage, and without the will to redefine their path, they remain stuck. 6. Breaking the spell, creating a new morality. So what do? Nietzsche didn't offer simple solutions. He despised comforting lies. But he did offer a path, the path of the Übermensch, the one who creates their own values. In today's terms, this could be the person who refuses to blindly follow moral norms, and instead chooses a life of intentional action. Breaking the spell of moral labor means rejecting the idea that suffering is inherently good It means asking, is my effort making me free? Or is it just making someone else rich? The goal is not to escape work. It is to transform work into will, into power, into purpose. Nietzsche's wisdom is dangerous because it strips away illusions. But in doing so, it offers the beginning of true freedom. Not the freedom handed down by governments or systems, but the freedom that arises when we no longer seek moral permission to live as we choose. Closing, a challenge to the viewer. The lie of moral labor is seductive. It flatters us. It tells us we're good just because we're tired. But if we want to live fully, we must ask deeper questions. What are you building? Who benefits from your struggle? Is your effort aligned with your own becoming, or are you simply fueling someone else's machine? Nietzsche challenges us not to suffer more, but to suffer with meaning, to work with vision, and to live with power. If this video gave you a new lens on life, subscribe, because here, we don't just explore philosophy, we use it to break free.